Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Erica Sherman, and I'm a member of the Education Committee. I am very pleased to welcome you to the Guidelines for Continuing Professional Development, Past, Present, and Future. In this session, representatives from FSBPT's Continuing Competence Committee will discuss the current state of the three elements of the Guidelines for Continuing Professional Development and the next steps to get the guidelines ready for use by member boards. The speakers for this session are Mario Baker, Alyssa Gibbons, and Ann Thompson. Mario Baker and Ann Thompson are members of the FSBPT Continuing Competence Committee. Alyssa Gibbons is an assistant professor at Colorado State University and has collaborated with the committee on projects related to the Healthy Practice Framework. You can find their bios in the event app. They have valuable information to share, and we also encourage your participation. If you have questions during the Q&A portion, we will bring you a microphone, and please abide by the ground rules in the program notebook so more attendees have a chance to ask questions. At the end of all of the sessions, there's a QR code to complete your evaluation, and we really appreciate your feedback. Now I'm going to turn the presentation over to our speakers.
Thanks and good afternoon. It's our pleasure to be with you this afternoon and talk about this tool that we have been working on for so very long. And we're just really pleased that you'll have an opportunity to look at it and also to give us very valuable feedback for the next stage of getting it together in preparation for production and unrolling it out into the public world. So with that in mind, let's go right to the meat of it so we can have enough time to actually spend with the app. We talked this morning about the fact that continuing professional development really hinges on being a legal, ethical practitioner, having the skills and knowledge to do good physical therapy, and also making sure that you are personally in good health and that your mental and physical well-being are well cared for, and also that the practice environment in which you are situated is one that supports that. And so to that end, we have put a long time, as we've said, into the development of this. And I really encourage you to go to these resource documents for more information. You will see that the pillars on which the tool you're about to see is founded include both personal and individual practice items for the individual, as well as the support and culture of that environment and the organizational system in which you reside. Now, this self-assessment is built on the first three pillars. The organizational would be a different issue altogether, although there are certainly things within support and culture that will come over into the organizational piece. But the tool itself we developed from those first three pillars. What does it do? Well, it's a self-reflection on your your professional well-being. It's a source of professional development with support resources based on the responses that you provide as you take that self-reflection experience. This tool will provide you with a brief feedback summary about each individual domain, and we have 10 domains, but it's not really domain-specific nor an overall summative numerical score. All you people got into physical therapy because you were very highly competitive A++ people, put it away. It's not a competition. It is also not punitive, nor really a remedial measure. It's not an evaluation. It's really for you to use. And we look at, too, within the jurisdictions as how could this serve your licensees? So please be assured of those things. It does not set a quantitative standard for acceptably healthy practice. And Alyssa will talk more about how this tool has been made for that purpose. It's not going to be used for licensure decisions. And the scores and responses are all confidential. Any data that could identify a user is only provided to that user. And we have kept that pledge through all stages of development, and we keep it ongoing. So with that in mind, I'm going to let Alyssa take you on the next part of our journey together today.
All right, thank you, Ann. Before I get into it, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge my collaborator and co-author, Dr. Gwen Fisher. She and I have been working on this project with the Continuing Competence Committee folks for several years. Only one of us was able to be here today, but she is definitely here in spirit, and this is her work as well. I know that lots of you have been along for the healthy practice self-reflection journey for a while, but I also know that some of you are new to this story. So I want to give you the brief overview. You can think of this as the first couple minutes of your favorite show where they have to catch you up on everything that happened last season. I'm going to try to do that for you quickly here. So, as Anne mentioned, this project started with the question of, is it feasible to have a self-directed, self-driven assessment be part of this, this tool for helping people understand the health of their practice? So we spent some time looking at the research literature. We investigated a lot of questions around self-assessment. And the question isn't so much, is it useful? It's when and how is it useful? Self-assessment, I think, triggers some concerns for a lot of people. Will people be honest? Will people try to present themselves in the best light? And certainly that is a thing that can happen. But we found lots of examples that self-assessment can be really effective when we're talking about things that are largely internal experiences. If you are talking about your own thoughts and feelings and perceptions, you are by far the most qualified person to talk about those things. We found quite a bit of evidence that self-reflection is useful in contexts that are developmental. So as Anne said, it's been very important to us that this is not something that you get an overall score for. You don't get gold stars for having the healthiest practice. You don't get shamed for areas where you might not be as healthy as you would like to be. It really is meant to be a developmental tool. Because what we want to make self-assessment effective are conditions where people are both able and willing to be honest, particularly to be honest with themselves. It's not so much a question of, are you reporting honestly on your own behavior to the regulatory board? It really is about, are you thinking honestly and sincerely about the state of affairs in your life, in your practice, what you want to maintain and what you want to change. So we've spent some time building this tool. In particular, we wanted to focus on the areas of that healthy practice framework that really are internal experiences. So there's the fun button, the personal and the support and culture pillars of that framework. Those are things that reflect people's own internal perceptions, experiences at work and surrounding work. So we established some goals. We wanted to create a tool that was going to be high quality and evidence-based. So a lot of the work that I'm going to talk to you about this weekend is establishing that good quality evidence base. We wanted something that was going to fit into people's lives. As you notice, there are a lot of components of this framework. Your healthy practice reflects a lot of different components of your life. So we wanted to make sure that we created a tool that could fit comfortably into people's experience. So we've designed it to be modular. I'm going to talk a little bit about the 10 modules that make up the resource in its current form. We wanted it to feel supportive, not punitive, not threatening or scary. And we wanted to make sure that we were covering the full spectrum of healthy practice. We didn't just want to focus in on the negative things like burnout and stress and anxiety. We also wanted people to reflect on the aspects of their lives that help sustain healthy practice, like their social support, positive aspects of their workplace culture. Because it's important not just to focus on what's wrong, what should I fix, but it's also really important to reflect on what's going well, what do I need to maintain, what do I need to make sure I keep as an important part of my life and my work. So, over the last couple of years, our team has put a lot of time into really building out what are the details of those healthy practice domains. So just as an example, one of the components in those pillars is the emotional well-being domain. We broke that down into some pieces, people's personal well-being, their workplace well-being, their well-being outside of work, And then we looked a little further in the research literature, and we identified a whole bunch of specific constructs or topics. So things like in personal well-being, this is where we looked at things like burnout and depression, meaning in life, resilience, satisfaction with life. So again, trying to span that whole possible spectrum of healthy to much less healthy practice. Over the course of this review, we identified good quality measures of each of these domains. We wanted to start with things that were evidence-based, that had some good existing evidence of reliability and validity. And then we wanted to make sure that we tailored those appropriately to the context of physical therapists and physical therapist assistants and the work that you all do. So we involved the Continuing Competence Committee. They reviewed a very lengthy draft of many, many measures and gave us lots of feedback about wording, pieces we might want to add. We made a lot of adaptations and tinkering to make sure that those items were going to be as relevant as we could get them to the population that we want to serve. And we created a working draft across these 10 domains. We had 64 measures and 441 individual items. Then we put it in front of all of you. When we presented last year, we were inviting you all to participate in our pilot test. This might look a little familiar to some of the folks in this room. We launched it last fall. We had 107 hardy souls who actually completed all 441 of those items. They did not all do it in one sitting, some of them did, but who completed everything for us. That was really helpful, but it wasn't quite enough data on some of these measures and some of these domains to really get the information that we needed. So across the spring and the summer, the Continuing Competence Committee launched several other big pushes. We had another 648 folks who contributed, who completed a module or two, so a smaller piece. But across all of that, we were able to put it all together. And that was really important for us. I cannot thank you enough if you were in the 107 or the 648 who contributed to this, because you allowed us to do something really valuable. You allowed us to take those items, that big long list, and really revise and refine and hone it. So to be a little tiny bit of a psychometric nerd, I promise I will keep this part very, very short, but I think it's helpful to know why we went to all this trouble. If you think about this circle here as representing a thing that we want to measure. So maybe this thing is representing your life satisfaction. How good do you feel about your life very generally, very globally right now? What we want to do when we write a measure, we want to choose items that are going to do a good job of covering as much of that idea as possible. Any one item can only do this so well. Any one item is imperfect. We're going to have some gaps. We're not going to cover the whole thing with just one item. We're going to have a little bit of error, a little bit of noise outside that thing that we want to measure. What we don't want to have happen when we start putting items together, though, we don't want a pattern like this, where we've got a whole bunch of items that are all getting at exactly the same part of that concept. And this is the thing that we can't know when we're writing the items up front. We don't know which of them are going to overlap to this degree. We do know that nobody wants to answer a whole bunch of items that are really all getting at exactly the same thing. So we want to get rid of those items that are redundant, and we want to make sure that we're filling out our measure in a way that's going to help us do a good job of covering that whole topic. So that's what we've been working on over the past several months, is taking that data and using it to get all of our measures as close to this state as we possibly can. We may not have filled in absolutely every little bit of the white space, but we're at a place where we feel pretty good about the measures that we have, and we have, in fact, trimmed and made it a lot more efficient. So right now, our revised version does still have quite a few scales. Overall, we have 335 items. If that sounds scary, remember the 441 from the last slide. But what I think is more important is that each of our 10 domains, our 10 modules, is now on average about 40 items. The longest I think is 64, and even that's not too bad, right? Hopefully that's not too bad. Well, we're gonna see what you think in a minute, because what we have for you today is a demonstration of one of the modules that we hope will become part of the eventual HPR. So you can scan this QR code right now. If you are QR code incompetent like me in your conference app, if you go to the description of this session and you scroll down to the bottom, there's also a link there that will take you right to the demo. And I would love for you to give this a test drive. What we're doing today is not for research, it's just to give you the experience and solicit your feedback. We're not collecting any data on you. We're not gonna ask you for any identifying information. But I will give you a few minutes here because I'd like you to be able to answer these things thoughtfully. And then at the end of the items, you will receive some preliminary feedback. I do have to put my disclaimers up here. This is not intended to diagnose any issue or disorder. It is designed to get you thinking. So please give it a try for a little bit. See what you think. Everybody's looking intent, but if you are having any technical troubles, please let us know. Raise your hand and we can come and help. I don't mean to rush anybody, but it's looking like most people are finished. Super quick technical feedback question. Did everybody actually get through and get feedback? No technical failures? Marvelous. Marvelous. I thought surely there would be a couple. Okay. If you are still kind of making your way through the feedback, I will just note that when you get all the way to the end, there's a little link that will allow you to download a PDF if you would like. Doesn't collect your email or any information like that. You can just save that feedback right to your phone or other device if you'd like to do that. So this is where we are in the project. We have the items. We are building out feedback and scoring and things for the behind the scenes stuff to make this work for the rest of the modules. But now we really have to think about what do you do with it when you get it. And the thing that we have come to realize is that going through and answering the questions isn't really the self-reflection part of the self-reflection resource. When you answer those questions, you're not telling us anything you didn't already know. You are, though, telling us things that you maybe haven't thought about in that way before. And you're thinking about things, and we're taking that and reflecting it back so that you can think about it a little bit more. The real self-reflection is what happens after you read that feedback. So some things that we want to encourage you and encourage future users to do, we want people to be able to use this in a really helpful way. So it's important to think about, did the feedback you read, does that ring true? Does that match your experience, your perceptions? If it doesn't, that can also be interesting information. You might want to think about where do you disagree? Where do you feel like that feedback wasn't quite an accurate summary of your life? That's the kind of self-reflection that we want to encourage people to engage in. And we don't just want people to ponder, we want people to reflect and use that reflection to go a little bit further. So the way that we're thinking about this right now is we want the feedback to be a prompt to do at least one of four things. To dig a little bit deeper, in terms of your own internal self-reflection, to go and seek more information, to learn more about a topic that you say, wow, I'd never really thought about that, I didn't realize that, I need to know some more. You might have noticed in lots of the feedback, we suggest starting conversations with important people in your life, getting that social support, making those connections, and possibly taking some further action. So one of the things that the committee has been working very hard on and is going to be working very hard on for the next little while is compiling resources that support those 4 steps. So in the next phase of the tool here, we will provide the feedback and then move folks on to some suggested resources. So some examples for the domain of work-life balance, which is very important, very salient to lots of folks. We might have things like, here's an article that might help you dig a little bit deeper. A good quality, evidence-based resource. We're trying to make sure that these are curated, that we know that the information in them is accurate and high quality, but here's something that might help you think a little bit more deeply about this. You might want to learn more. It turns out, if you are interested, there are quite a few continuing education opportunities related to work-life balance under the heading of self-care. There's been quite a bit of debate about not wanting to endorse or promote very particular continuing ed resources. That doesn't quite seem appropriate for the intention of this tool, but we can give some guidance to say, hey, here's how to find where you can get good information about this. We might give some suggestions. There is lots of good advice out there, and we can also create some good advice about how to start those conversations. Or we might even recommend some action steps. Here are some small things that you could do immediately. This is just an example. If you are struggling with work-life balance, something that you might consider doing is trying the experiment of saving some time for yourself. Treating time for your work-life balance just as seriously as you treat any appointment with a client on your calendar. So small action steps, maybe nothing revolutionary or earth-shattering here, but things that people can act on, that they might not have taken the initiative to do before they engaged in this self-reflection. So these are just illustrative examples. This is by no means the extent of what we want to do, but we wanted to give you a sense of where this is going, what we want the big picture to look like. So we are in the process right now. The Continuing Competence Committee is in the process of doing lots and lots and lots of digging, curating those resources, compiling many lists of good quality information, and I think Mario is going to talk about that a little more in a minute. We are looking certainly for things that are broad, industry-wide, even broader than physical therapy, looking at healthcare-specific resources, things that are going to be useful, and also trying, eventually the goal is to include jurisdiction-specific resources. So a jurisdiction might be able to say, we know that these continuing ed opportunities are available. We offer these resources for our folks, so that there are things that are local, that are accessible, that people feel connected to. And so we have many questions. We'd love to open it up a little bit for questions that you have or comments or feedback. A thing we would particularly love to hear from you today is what kinds of resources would be most appealing to you? So I think we'll open the floor for a little bit here.
Thank you, Melissa. Scott Stevens from North Carolina. And this is hypothetical, but if my evaluation came back and said I seem to have a nice life, family, work balance, and the suggestion was, have you considered reality orientation? How should I react to that?
I have heard that there are people who can legitimately manage it. I think more seriously, it is important to also let people know where things are okay, where things in their life are maybe not as out of balance, things to maintain. Something that I have learned over many years of giving feedback to people about lots of different domains is that if you only focus on deficits, if you only go in and say, this is what's not working, this is what I have to fix, this is what I have to fix, that's a long list and it never ends. And it becomes really overwhelming, it becomes really demotivating. So I think something that is important is for people to be able to say, hey, this in my life is great. I have this resource. And then to be able to connect that resource to some of the things that aren't so great. If there is somebody out there who has fabulous work-life balance, I want them to know that. I want them to prioritize it. I want them to not take it for granted because that's going to help them buffer against workplace stress and conflict and incivility that they might be encountering from patients and clients. So I think those positive things, I do want people to know about that. I think that is important. Does that address your hypothetical at all?
Just being funny. So first, I just wanted to say this is incredible. Having been, yeah. I was on the Continuing Competence Committee at one time, like way before Healthy Practice, and this shift is truly amazing. I mean, own it. But in response to your question about what kind of resources do you want to see, about a year and a half ago, we made a switch in our substance use disorder program that our board participates with, and it's a private company, but they serve healthcare providers in North Carolina. And right now, we didn't choose to go down the road of also engaging them for mental health. And because I'm on the investigative committee as well, I'm seeing that has just exploded, as I'm sure many others are. And so, help for boards to, what are those courses like PBI that we were talking about today? I mean, are there things that we could use or co-use with an individual licensee? Because I think this is just outstanding. So thank you.
Hi, that was a great presentation. My name's Jack Brodick. I'm from West Virginia. Things racing through my head, and I'll just ramble here for a second, and maybe you can direct me a little bit. But it's like when I think about this, I think about things like I very much know that I live to work as opposed to my daughter who works to live, and we've talked about that, and sometimes in connecting with my baby boomer self to Generation XYZ, it's like there's only one of me, but there's bunches of you, so why can't you relate to me? And I guess it's somewhat, like with orthopedic residents and what they went through in the past, a number of hours you hear about things, and if you haven't been there, how do you know what you can do? It kind of leads me to the saying, if you can't meet your expectations, lower your expectations. So those are kind of the whole thing running through my head, and like, how do you know, how do you know how much you can push if you haven't pushed a little bit and haven't been there with people? So, but I think this is a great tool. It's just that I'm not sure, like the way I interpret it may be different, a lot different from the way my daughter interprets the whole thing. So.
I think I see what you're saying there. Well, but about the need to create something that's not going to make people feel undue pressure to be spectacular in all of these areas, but also to let people know where there's room. where they could perhaps grow, where they could maybe see some benefit from a little bit more challenge. That's really helpful for me as I'm writing feedback. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Katie from Louisiana. My comment is going to touch on that, but I thought it was really interesting. Apparently, I have an amazing work-life balance, but if you would ask me that, I would have said no. So that was very interesting. But my thoughts were similar to yours, but kind of in a different way. Because people are such individuals, obviously, and have different personalities, introverts, extroverts, like what gives them energy, what doesn't give them energy, etc. There's such good data in like the personality profile type world that is there kind of any opportunity to kind of meld some of that together, like if you're offering suggestions, resources, advice, to find the things that resonate to you as a baby boomer, to your daughter, etc., that will prompt an action as opposed to a general recommendation.
I think that's great food for thought. I think there are places where we can definitely do that. I think there are places where the research is a bit more general and says, hey, these things probably are good for everybody. And certainly we want to, if we know something is good for everybody, we want to encourage them to do that. But there are some places where, yeah, the personality research literature does suggest if you have these tendencies, you might do better with this. I think we want to make sure that that's still evidence-based. But I think that's definitely good food for thought.
This is Tony Dominich. I'm from Texas, and again, I applaud you as well. I think this is a great tool. And in the educational arena, I'm always trying to assess my faculty as far as their well-being. And as a program director, I'm kind of concerned about balance in their lives because I always have the philosophy, if my faculty are healthy, my students will get what they need. And it will have a positive effect and should snowball to a positive outcome in the end. So is this going to be, I got 2 or 3 questions, hopefully I won't, but is this available, like, is it going to be communicated when it's available, and is it going to be housed in the Resource Center for FSBPT, and can I have, as an educator, encourage my faculty to take this self-assessment? I was curious what was the plan?
I'm going to give broad strokes, and we've got Jeff in the audience too. So, yes, a lot of those questions are the ones that the committee actually came up with a couple of weeks ago. When we finally had this ready to roll, it was like the dog chasing the car. We caught it. Now what do we do? We do want it to be available. It should be broadly available for students, faculties, et cetera. We do not anticipate that there will be, and Jeff, hop up and correct me, but we do not anticipate there would be a cost for this. This would be a resource, and it would probably live in a place where you could get it.
Everything Ann said is accurate, that we don't anticipate a cost. We don't know where it's going to reside just yet. We've had discussions that it may live in the HRRI website. We just know, and the committee's still having some discussions on things like, should we store the data so that potentially we can do, de-identified research on the results? Would storing the data actually create a disincentive for people to be honest when they take the tool? So these are some of the questions that the committee is still working on. And if anyone has any thoughts for the committee on some of this, obviously when you take your session evaluation at the end, put that in the comments, and we can make sure that the committee gets some of the feedback that people have on some of those issues. But we really, we spent a lot of time getting to the point where we had something to demo. And now the next steps are for the committee, or where do we go from here on a lot of the logistical questions that I think people have been asking.
So I have a couple more, just content questions, because I haven't reviewed all the domains and everything that you're asking in the domains. But one is I just finished a documentary on blue zones, and they studied centenarians and what was the commonality of reaching 100 years of age or more, and community was one of them. And so I'm assuming you're hitting that in some of the questions. And then secondly, this behavioral boundaries we heard today, and being preventive. Especially, what was it, the intentional blindness, that sort of thing, where we don't know what we're not knowing type of thing. Is that addressed in a domain and with questions too? Because I would want to have the PBI resources would be great if I fell into being identified as somebody that needs help in a particular area, if I was being truthful and answering this honestly.
We do not currently have attentional blindness specifically called out in here, but the intent is that this is going to be a living resource. So that's something that could be developed without nearly as much trouble as the whole initial setup, something that could be added, built in down the road. We do have quite a few things that are related to some of the risk factors that they were speaking about this morning, like your time demands and your attention. We've got some measures in there about your cognitive well-being, which we know is impacted by stress and workload. We have lots of measures that are related to different aspects of social support at work, at home. Do you feel supported by your organization, your supervisor, your coworkers? So we do have lots of pieces about that. I think that connects a little bit to what Jeff was just saying about one of the things that we could do with this, if people are willing to share de-identified responses, is do some long-term data analysis looking for some of those patterns. Can we identify strong trends and say people who are showing high scores on these measures tend to see high scores over here on these outcomes that are concerning? We could maybe use that to target a little bit more and get people's attention and say, this is something this should be really high on your radar. We can do a little bit of that now because we do have data about these things from other domains. We could get a lot more precise with it if we made this into a data collection thing under the hood. But again, that raises lots of privacy and confidentiality concerns, and it may not be worth it. So that's definitely a thing that we are wrestling with.
I have if you're going to try to do some data research, I would give people the choice. You can either opt in or opt out kind of thing. And I think that's one way of dealing with the privacy issues. You opt in or you opt out. My second thought was you were talking about more generalized resources rather than specific. And I think I see a person coming in and doing a module, and then getting to the end of that module, and if there's not any really good places for them to go to get some of those resources, it's not worth my time. And so I think that you need to be thinking along the lines of specific places for people to go if they want to. And I realize that's going to take a lot of updating and keeping current. But I think you're going to lose somebody after Module 1 if you don't do that.
Thank you. Yes, that also validates conversations we've been having. Wanting to make sure people are getting something they see as actionable and useful right now.
Hi, I'm Cindy Tamayo from Hawaii. I'm here as a legislator, but I'm also a director of rehab. And kind of like Tony was saying, my staff, all of our staff that are really in a difficult place coming out of COVID and whatnot, and I see burnout all the time. As a legislator, I think it's important also to help directors, managers, business owners to be able to identify this in your staff so that you can help them, give them the tools, whatever. productivity and all that stuff. We just keep piling more and more on them. The documentation, all that leads a lot to that. So it would be really wonderful if there was some way to extract, or as a group, you could have your staff and get de-identified information, so that I, as a director of these very, very important people in our organization, can help them and to be able to identify where there is a need, because it's great for them to know they're burnt out or that they don't have good work-life balance. But if I don't know that and I just keep piling, then I'm constantly having to replace these skilled individuals. I have enough of a staffing issue, which then causes more burnout and more burden on the people who are behind. So if there's ever a way to make this tool something that could provide business owners, managers, whatever, with some feedback on how their staff are doing, that would be really helpful for me. And I think in the end, definitely for public protection, because often we're the ones putting the burden on them.
A lot. These are the tough issues. These are the issues that we've had very open and frank and vigorous discussions about, because everything's a trade, everything's a balance. I think it's important, in order for us to begin using this tool, that everyone understand it comes to the user. And that's where it is right now. That we're sitting here looking at, it comes to the user. Are there options that could be built in at the start for, yes, you may share my de-identified data? Absolutely needs to be looked at as well, for some of the reasons that you're saying. As long as the user knows that nothing's going to happen without me saying okay, and that because it took us a couple of years to get this level of trust, to get 700 people to take this. The reason it's taken us so long to get here is we had some pushback, and rightfully so in today's environment. So I'm glad we're openly discussing it here, so that we've been struggling with it. We'd like to hear what your thoughts are, and there's going to be another opportunity. We're going to ask, you'll see it in a little bit, we're going to ask you to give us feedback after you've had a chance to think about it again.
Okay. Hi, Judith Halverson from Louisiana. This is going to kind of tie the comment here and the comment here. I'm thinking about that user, that licensee who takes this, and they are burdened by the productivity and the documentation and COVID and all of that. And they're a younger licensee who is working to live. And so they take this and they go, but my boss doesn't understand. I am in an environment that is, in their mind, toxic and all of that. They don't have this wonderful person who wants to know this data. So I guess my comment is, and maybe it's a question, from that user resources, how to have that conversation back to that employer to help with all of that. So some tools along those lines.
Yeah, this is Ron Barreto, Tennessee. While I was completing this tool, I had two comments. The first one is, the presumption is that the person who does a self-assessment knows to be true to himself or herself, right? And the second thing is, as I was filling out the questionnaire, I'm thinking to myself, I wonder what my wife would say, because it's a totally different dynamic. And so I thought this is one of those things that maybe this is how I see myself, but my significant other or my boss or someone else may be having a different thought. So I just wanted to give that comment.
How many more? Does sound really interesting.
Do you want a few more questions?
Yeah, I think we've got time for a couple more. One or two more.
Hello, Ellen Rober from North Carolina. One thing you mentioned, having resources, but not really wanting to plug one CE course versus another. And I would say, in this case, when we're talking about healthy practice, I would love it if you would plug a couple of resources so that we can push them out for licensees to have. If we really want to prevent, we got to know where to send them and not be afraid to send them to somewhere that's evidence-based and that sort of thing. to give a more global resource, they may never take the time to do it. So that is one thing I want to encourage. A second is we, in our rules, our board rules already have a category for reflective practice exercises would fit right in lovely. And I will give a shout out to Kathy, but because she did a lot of work for that reflective practice exercise, but you all could use it to help, because a part of that is having the user make goals and a plan and then follow that and then document, because that's what they then use for their continuing competence credit should they be audited.
Could you email that to us? Email or point us to it or give us a website or? It sounds really, really interesting. Thank you.
To your point, I just completed working as a director of rehab, and I had a lot of pressure because I was in the middle of nowhere and trying to staff it. OT, PT, speech. We had an outpatient, skilled nursing, and assisted living. And if my mom would have taken that, she would have said I was going to lose my mind. If I would have taken that during that role, I was like, I'm fine. I feel great. I'm getting up every day. I have all the energy. I'm, recruiting across the country, trying to fill roles. But today, when I took that and I pretended I was still in that, being very honest, I was like, yeah, I pretty much was red on everything. So I think it's like you said, you don't know. I had no idea. Now I'm like, whew. She was asking me the other day, what are you going to do now? I'm like, nothing. I'm not going to do a thing for a minute. I need a minute. So anyway, so you had a good point.
Great. Well, thanks so much. I'm going to hand it to Mario here in just a second, but I did just want to let you know, as Ann said, we are going to ask you a little bit later. You should get an email probably this evening asking you, after you've let things percolate for a little bit, just for some feedback and responses to the demo itself. And if you have thoughts about any of these suggestions that people have raised, that would be a wonderful way to get those to us.
I just want to quickly address your question before we move on to Max as well. If you think that sharing that with a family member, if they were to take it, they would see you differently, one suggestion would be to share your results with them if you feel comfortable doing that, and ask them, is this how you see me? And then they can give you their feedback and potentially say, maybe you weren't being very honest because I don't see you that way. And that could be another source of feedback. Yeah, so that's one way to quickly address that particular issue. But I wanted to highlight the point that this is where we're going from here. So we've been talking about next steps, and we're very intent upon getting your feedback, which I'm very happy you all were so willing to give that feedback, because we're having discussions around what do we do with this tool, where do we go from here, and we want to consider, the fact that there may be some hesitancy or reluctance, but ultimately we'd like to roll this out to all the jurisdictions and have everybody participate. What will it take to get to that point? And we've had some good comments here. One that I don't think we've considered was opt in or opt out, if you wanted to be used in research or not. Etc. So we thank you for your feedback on those things. But we're still in the process of compiling the information, the resources that we're going to be using. These resources are going to be vetted. So right now we're just gathering everything. The committee's doing work on gathering all the resources that we can find on a particular topic area. Then we're going to use a fine-tooth comb to go through those resources to say, okay, this is a good resource, this is not so good of a resource, this resource is supported by the literature, this isn't so much supported by the literature, this is an evidence-based resource, this is not so much an evidence-based resource. So we're in the process of compiling that. We had the opportunity to get together and go through the 10 modules with Alyssa and her colleague and read the questions and say, okay, this one wasn't scoring very well. We would reword it like this for the population that we're targeting, and maybe we should just get rid of that question altogether. And we were able, as Alyssa alluded to minimize the number of questions on that document. There is potentially a possibility that we could minimize it more with the feedback that you give us. And in addition to that, the issues of privacy and security are always in the back of most individuals' minds. Where is this going? Who's going to get this? If I give this information that the state board rolled out to them, are they going to use that information against me? So there's always that lingering topic of security and privacy. And then guidance for the jurisdictions. What do we tell the jurisdictions? What's the best way to roll this out to their constituents? And so I'll go through a few of those things here. Again, these are just a few resources that we've started compiling. This is by no means an exhaustive list, but under the modules, as I'll review those real quick, we have emotional well-being, mental well-being, we have social and non-work well-being, and we just listed a few resources there that you can, I like that you can look at under that particular module and say life satisfaction. Well, the Pew Research, a short read. But I like the idea as well of the CEU courses that an individual may be able to attend. The problem with that is we can endorse those particular courses. So maybe we'll have a disclosure to say, this is an option, we can endorse it. We're not using this, as Alyssa said, to be diagnostic, but here's something you can look at potentially, along with a lot of other sources that will be made available to the individual. Again, we have the areas of mental well-being and also social and non-work well-being. And again, there's a few resources that are attached to those. The next set of modules, we have financial well-being, which is a subject that needs to be addressed, and it's important, and it does affect healthy practice. Also physical health, and then work-related well-being. And so we've really vetted these particular modules to try to hit the clinician in a holistic way, okay? You're not just a, one issue individual. There's multiple issues that could influence healthy practice. So we wanted to try to really get to those issues. And then the next is going to be work role support, benefits and wellness, and also practice climate. So, and resources associated with that. And then also our compassion resources that we have developed, looking at civility norms and also identity freedom and so forth. So when building all of the 10 modules, again, we're in the process right now of going through and revising, like I said. We're going to use your input that you've given today and input that you'll give in the future, hopefully here, short future. And then also, your questions and input today are, I want to say just one more time, are going to be extremely valuable to the work that we're going to continue to do. And then the issue of privacy and security that's in the back of everyone's mind. Right now, our stance is the scores and responses are confidential, and any data that could be identified, that could identify an individual will only be provided to that individual. So if you choose to share that data, you can do that. But that's where we are right now. And I think starting out, individuals may be more prone to take this if they know that this is only coming to me. We can introduce the idea of using the data in aggregate form, where nobody's identified, the identified data in aggregate form. But I think we're still discussing that process and the pros and cons to doing that. And then also, nothing is reported to the licensing board at this time. Is there, a way to report that in aggregate? Sure, but I don't think we ever want to get to the point where we're reporting individuals' data and outcome, because they can look at that as, maybe a punitive deal. And then our next steps are to include the development of the final platform, okay? And within that, we're going to definitely consider the security of that final platform. So guidance for the jurisdictions. Well, we want everybody to use it, of course. We want this to go to all jurisdictions and everybody to buy into this. And also we want to equip the jurisdictions with some fuel for the questions that they're going to get regarding this. So when we're looking at the healthy practice resource, it's going to be useful as a resource. And that's what it is right now, a resource for continuing competence. So we'd like the jurisdictions to consider whether some type of continuing competence credit could be awarded to an individual for taking this. If you have some say in that matter, maybe because that gets more buy-in amongst the clinicians. Hey, I'm going to get some credit for doing this. Well, this is worth doing. And it's really going to be to their benefit to do that self-reflection, and hopefully they're honest in that self-reflection. In addition to that, we want individuals to complete that reflection, really dive into it, and hopefully it identifies some things that they may not have thought of that they can incorporate into their particular practice. So, what other resources should we consider? You can scan the QR code and do that Slido. And the ones that you've mentioned, you can mention again, but we've written them down as well.
And if I can just add, when we say roll it out to the jurisdictions, we're not saying we're sending this to the jurisdictions. We're putting it out in all jurisdictions, kind of like our coverage area, so to speak. But this is not something that would be administered through your jurisdictions. What we would like from the jurisdictions would be to value it for continuing competence.
Yeah.
I'm Katie again from Louisiana. As those are going, just thought I'd mention something. So I'm in my 6th year as a board member, and I remember my very first year, I came onto the board, and the next week was the first FSBPT conference that I came to. And I remember it was the first time really the conversation about burnout was really coming up. And I remember being like, all right, I'm motivated, like we're gonna be a proactive board, and this is so important, and we're gonna do things so that we stop people from having to come in front of us. And so we had this huge initiative kind of planned, and our attorneys were like, nope, right? So it's not within our authority to be a proactive board. And so I still to this day kind of struggle with how important this stuff is and where it fits in the regulatory world. If your statutes and rules of your authority as a board are really pointed towards licensure and disciplinary action. And so as you guys have been thinking about this and seeing how it's connected to all of those things, can y'all just comment on that if you don't mind?
So if you would just summarize your question, if I'm summarizing your question, how does this fit with basically proactive action for the licensees? Okay, perfect. Great, thanks.
Here's a QR code for the evaluation link. Please take advantage of that. And we thank you for your feedback in person here, and we look forward to your feedback in the future. Thank you.